What's going on, ProGuides family? My name is Dan, and I'm bringing you a special video today with our first look at KILLJOY. But before we dive into the video, we gotta go over our question of the day. Today's question is, how good do you think that KILLJOY is going to be? Feel free to leave your answer after you finish watching the video and have taken a look at all of his abilities. I'll be giving my opinion at the end of the video so as not to spoil some of his features. So let's finally dive into it. So, as we were researching KILLJOY's abilities, we never found exactly what ability coordinated to what ability key. We're going to have to try and assume in what order they came in, though looking at the abilities, we think that they just started with the first ability C and just kept going in order to Q, then E, then Ultimate or X ability. So starting off with what we assume is their C ability, Alarmbot. It looks like KILLJOY gets access to a small robot that can be placed within a certain distance from themselves, sort of like lining up a sage wall or omen smoke. While placing Alarmbot, you get to see a small outline of its area of effect. After placing, it will attach to the surface and stay visible for a few seconds, sort of like when Cypher first places his spy cam. After that delay, it then turns invisible. When an enemy steps inside its range, it will activate and tag an enemy while also alerting KILLJOY with a pop-up on the inside of their HUD. After tagging an enemy, Alarmbot will then rush them and explode, dealing a moderate amount of damage and making the enemy vulnerable to damage from all sources for some unknown amount of time. KILLJOY can also choose to recall Alarmbot just like Cypher can with his trapwire and spy cam. It looks like Alarmbot is primarily used to defend important angles and get the drop on your enemies, as since it can be placed vertically, you can have it detect enemies below it and rush towards them before they think to look up. It's going to become very interesting when you're grouping up as a team and then all of a sudden you hear it beep and look around and see nothing. I would assume that it is destructible though, so as long as you have a raise with blast packs or simply just shooting it the second it activates, it feels like there are enough ways to deal with it before it explodes that it feels pretty balanced. I would say it is simply a less efficient trapwire, but it is better at maybe dealing a bit of damage if the enemy team is completely off their rocker. Next up, we're going to take a look at KILLJOY's potential Q ability, Turret. Turret is very interesting as it introduces something we've never seen before. When activating their Q, there's a small amount of lag after which they can gain access to a small, turret. Once again, KILLJOY can choose where to place the turret in a certain distance from themselves. After placing, the turret will also take a few seconds to start up before fully activating. It won't go invisible like Alarmbot, but will instead fold into itself and wait. It is unclear right now just how destructible it is in this form, or even if it is destructible at all. After an enemy steps into its 180-degree range, it will activate and start firing bullets at the closest enemy in 3-round bursts. Again, like Alarmbot, KILLJOY can choose to recall turret if they want by just holding the ability key. As you guys can see, this is definitely unlike anything we have seen in Valorant before. The closest thing we have is probably Cypher's spy cam, and it definitely seems that KILLJOY will be an interesting mix of damage and intel, sort of like Sova, but with abilities more designed around Cypher and other agents. Turret has the potential to be a pretty broken ability, as we discussed before. Even Riot themselves said that they wanted abilities to set up for kills, not get kills. And a turret that can automatically fire at enemies close by is definitely bridging that gap. I'm sure that the damage that it deals is pretty low per shot and that it would be hard to die to just the turret alone, but I feel like we'll still get some clips of people looking like they're behind a wall only to have a turret still be locked on and shoot them and killing them. I hope that I'm wrong, and if Riot manages to pull off an ability like this that feels both fair to use and fair to play against, I think it will add a very interesting dynamic to the game that could really do a lot to incentivize more scouting and early game aggression to find that turret and potentially remove it from the round before it becomes a nuisance. When KILLJOY actually gets released and we get the chance to play around with them and mess around with their abilities more in depth, we will be releasing a guide talking about their abilities and how we think they fit into the meta. With the last of KILLJOY's basic abilities, we have Nanoswarm. Nanoswarm takes the form of a grenade that KILLJOY can throw, sort of like Viper's Poison Cloud. When the grenade lands on the ground, it will stay there invisible until KILLJOY activates it, like Cypher's Cyber Cage. When activated, it will release a swarm of nanobots that will deal damage to enemies and maybe allies that are within its area of effect. It seems to deal a good amount of damage as well, as the video we watched as we were researching these abilities showed a Sova standing in the area of effect and dying very quickly. Hopefully, it won't be so powerful that people will lose a decent amount of their health just trying to escape from it. Also, it will be interesting to see if they are destructible even while invisible, which would be a nice way to help balance the ability. If they are not destructible while placed on the ground, then I feel like it will be a bit more frustrating to deal with in-game. It's another ability that really takes KILLJOY in the Cypher direction. It's very interesting to me. He really is an intel agent, but he is more focused on damage first, it seems like, and intel second. As you'll see in just a second, even his ultimate is pretty crazy and another really great tool at preventing pushes or stalling enemies just like Cypher is. The last ability we're going to be looking at today, and the ultimate in KILLJOY's kit, we have Lockdown. Lockdown is a pretty interesting ability, but with an insane wind-up time, it will be interesting to see just how people approach the challenge. When activated, KILLJOY gets access to another, you guessed it, placeable ability, but this one is pretty different from the rest. When placed, the beacon will start to power up, emitting a very noticeable noise and waves of light that will inform enemies of its activation. For the first around 14 seconds of the ability, the beacon simply charges up and appears to do nothing. While the beacon is active, it can be destroyed by enemies, so this is their chance to destroy it before it hits them with a full 8 seconds of debuffs. We're talking reduced movement and most likely a reduced rate of fire. But when these are lasting for 8 seconds, this is a death sentence for any that are caught inside its blast. This is most similar to something like Breach's ultimate Rolling Thunder, but is still pretty different. Whereas Breach's ult does not stun you for as long, but also does not give as much warning, Lockdown seems to be a giant fuck off card. It essentially warns all enemies that their world is about to get turned upside down and dares them to do anything about it. When paired with the rest of KILLJOY's abilities, we start to see almost exactly how this ultimate fits in with the rest of their kit. Imagine placing this on the back of B site on Ascent and daring any defenders to come and try and retake the site from your team. With an Alarmbot set up on the moving door and turret watching CT, you could have a Nanoswarm ready to cover sidewalk in case anyone walks out B main. There are so many fun ways I can imagine people using these abilities to just completely style on the enemy team. As we've just seen here, KILLJOY is most likely going to be the type of agent you really don't want to walk into the wrong side against. They are tricky and will whittle you down with chip damage here and there, forcing you to watch all your angles and be on the lookout for booby traps constantly. KILLJOY is going to be a sentinel, as Riot has previously stated that after Reyna, the next class of agent they were going to release was going to be a sentinel. Going up against agents like Sage and Cypher, honestly, KILLJOY will probably fit right in. It'll be hard to predict how these abilities will shake up the meta, but with the amount of chip damage we're seeing presenting with KILLJOY, lurkers and solo players are going to have a hell of a time dealing with KILLJOY's abilities if they aren't constantly paying attention. Your best bet when playing against them will be to group up and attack as a team. Remember, you will most likely have a window to destroy a lot of KILLJOY's abilities, so be ready to flick to a robot crawling towards your face saying something about an explosion. In all seriousness, KILLJOY is probably best for area of denial and holding retakes. I mean, especially when you're on a short timer, trying to deal with all of these abilities will be a nightmare, and since KILLJOY can pick up Alarmbot and turret from a distance, KILLJOY can reposition 2 of their most important abilities throughout the round to cover a lot of area. The only questions I'm left with is how many of each ability will they have access to. I doubt that Riot will give them more than 1 turret, so they may have access to 2 Alarmbots or 2 Nanoswarms. We also don't know exactly how many ultimate points their ultimate will cost. I'm sure it will cost 7 or more simply just because of how big of an area of denial or CC tool it is. With that strong of a debuff present, forcing the enemy team to essentially choose between doing nothing and running away or losing the ability to walk and probably shoot properly for 8 seconds. It will be fun to see how these abilities are used for some fun combos with other agents, and I hope to see the absolute dumpster fire that a Cypher and a KILLJOY will bring on the same team. Well guys, that is all we have for you today. If you liked the video, then be sure to give it a like and even consider subscribing. We put out a new video every single day and you definitely don't want to miss it. Be sure to also visit ProGuides.com to gain access to some of the best Valorant coaching around. Choose from any of our high elo coaches to help you develop the skills you need to reach the rank that you deserve. All links are down in the description below. Remember, stay safe and I'll see y'all again soon.